The bathroom floor was cold against Catherine Walsh's cheek. She could barely remember how she got here, couldn't recall when her legs had stopped working properly. 9 days. That's how long it had been since she'd eaten anything solid. 72 hours since she'd managed even water. Her designer dress hung on her frame like a sheet over bones, the pale blue fabric now several sizes too large. Her blonde hair, usually glossy and carefully styled, lay in matted clumps around her face. Somewhere in the distance, she heard knocking. Voices. Her father's deep tone, cracking with something that might have been panic. "Catherine, please. Please open this door." She wanted to tell him she couldn't move. That her body had finally given up the same way her heart had 3 weeks ago. But her mouth wouldn't form words anymore. Her tongue felt thick and foreign. The door burst open. She hadn't locked it after all, or maybe someone had found the key. Strong, familiar hands touched her face, her neck, searching for a pulse. "Dear God in heaven," Lorraine Parker's voice cut through the fog. "Richard, call 911 right now." Catherine felt herself being lifted, cradled against Lorraine's chest like a child. The housekeeper had worked for the Walsh family for 15 years, had been there when Catherine graduated college, when she'd gotten her first job at her father's company, when her mother had smiled that last morning before everything ended. "Stay with me, baby girl," Lorraine whispered, her voice steady despite the tears Catherine could hear in it. "You stay right here with me." Richard Walsh, one of the wealthiest men in California, knelt beside them on the bathroom floor of his mansion. His salt and pepper hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled. He looked like he'd aged 20 years in 3 weeks. "I don't know what to do," he said, his voice breaking completely. "I've lost Patricia. I can't lose her too." The paramedics arrived within minutes. Catherine watched their faces blur and shift as they checked her vital signs. She heard words like dehydration, malnutrition, and critical condition. They loaded her onto a stretcher, and Lorraine held her hand the entire way to the ambulance. In the hospital, Catherine drifted in and out of consciousness. Doctors inserted fours, ran tests, spoke in hushed tones about feeding tubes and psychiatric evaluation. Her father sat in a chair beside her bed, his face buried in his hands. Lorraine stood at the window, her dark skin luminous in the harsh hospital lights, her expression set with determination. "This ends now," Lorraine said quietly, though Catherine barely heard it. "I didn't save that girl from scraped knees and broken hearts just to watch her fade away." Catherine's eyes fluttered closed. She wanted the darkness. In the darkness, she didn't have to remember that Tuesday morning. Didn't have to see her mother's smile at breakfast, hear her laugh on the phone planning lunch, feel the weight of the call that came 2 hours later. Brain aneurysm. Instant. Gone. "Catherine," her father's voice pulled her back. "Please, sweetheart. Whatever you need. Whatever it takes. New doctors, different hospitals, anything. Just please, come back to us." But Catherine had already made her choice. Without her mother, the world felt wrong. Food tasted like ash, water like poison. Her body rejected everything because her heart had rejected the reality she was living in. Have you ever loved someone so much that losing them felt like losing yourself? Drop a comment below about how you cope with grief, and make sure to subscribe so you never miss the incredible journey ahead. 3 weeks earlier, Catherine had been laughing. She remembered that with perfect clarity, how the memory haunted her in those first days. It was a Tuesday morning in August, and the California sun had streamed through the breakfast room windows of the Walsh estate. Her mother, Patricia Walsh, had been wearing her favorite yellow dress, the one that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. "Your father wants to expand into real estate development," Patricia had said, rolling her eyes with affectionate exasperation. As if software and tech investments weren't enough to manage. Catherine had grinned over her coffee. "Let him. You know he gets bored if he's not building something." "That's what I'm afraid of," Patricia had laughed, that musical sound that Catherine would replay in her mind 1,000 times in the coming weeks. "Next he'll want to buy a sports team or start a space program." They'd made plans for lunch at Patricia's favorite Italian restaurant. Catherine had a presentation at Walsh Technologies that morning, something about the new artificial intelligence division. Her mother had been so proud of her, even though Catherine felt like she was just playing at being a businesswoman, still learning the ropes at 24. "I'll pick you up at noon," Patricia had said, kissing Catherine's forehead. "Wear something nice. I want to introduce you to Helen Brennan. She runs the children's hospital charity I've been working with." Those were the last words her mother ever spoke to her. Normal, everyday words about lunch and clothes and charity work. Nothing profound or final. Nothing that suggested in 4 hours, Patricia Walsh would collapse in the lobby of the children's hospital she'd been touring. That by the time the ambulance arrived, she'd already be gone. Catherine had been in the middle of her presentation when her father's assistant found her. The look on Jennifer's face had said everything before a single word was spoken. The conference room had gone silent. Catherine had dropped her laser pointer, heard it clatter across the table, watched 20 executives stare at her with varying expressions of horror and pity. The next week was a blur of funeral arrangements, grief counselors, lawyers reading the will, and hundreds of people telling her they were sorry for her loss. Catherine had moved through it like a ghost, numb and disconnected. She'd worn black, nodded at appropriate moments, accepted hugs from people whose names she couldn't remember. Richard had thrown himself into work, spending 18 hours a day at the office, coming home only to sleep in his study because their bedroom was too full of Patricia's absence. Catherine had understood. The house felt wrong without her mother's laughter, without her footsteps on the stairs, without her humming while she arranged flowers in the foyer. Lorraine had tried to maintain normalcy. She'd kept the house running, made meals no one ate, and watered Patricia's roses in the garden. But even Lorraine, who'd been with them since Catherine was 9 years old, couldn't fill the void Patricia had left. Catherine started skipping meals. First just breakfast, then lunch. Dinner became a few bites pushed around a plate before she excused herself. Her father didn't notice, too lost in his own grief. Lorraine noticed, but her gentle questions met walls of silence. "Your mama would want you to eat," Lorraine had said one evening, finding Catherine staring at an untouched plate. "My mama isn't here," Catherine had replied, the first sharp words she'd ever spoken to Lorraine. The housekeeper had simply nodded, cleared the plate without comment, and returned to the kitchen. By the end of the second week, Catherine had stopped leaving her room. By the third week, she'd stopped pretending to eat at all. Food felt like a betrayal, like admitting life could continue when her mother's had stopped. Each meal refused was a small act of rebellion against a world that had taken the most important person from her. She'd read somewhere that people could survive weeks without food. She wondered how long it would take, whether her father would understand when it was over that she simply couldn't do this without her mother. Lorraine found her journal on the nightstand during one of her cleaning rounds. Catherine had been too weak to hide it, too far gone to care. The entries were brief, growing shorter as the days passed. Day 1, everything tastes like nothing. Day 3, Dad looks at me like I'm already gone. Day 5, Lorraine brought soup. Poured it down the sink. Day 7, so tired. So empty. Day 9, maybe this is how it ends. That's when Lorraine had called Richard home from the office, insisted he check on his daughter. That's when they'd found Catherine collapsed on the bathroom floor, barely breathing, her pulse thread-thin beneath translucent skin. In the hospital that night, after the doctors had stabilized her with 4 fluids and nutrients, Lorraine sat in the chair Richard had abandoned to make phone calls in the hallway. She watched Catherine sleep, the girl she'd helped raise, and made a decision. "I know you can hear me, sweet girl," Lorraine said softly. "And I know you think you can't go on without your mama. But Patricia loved you more than life itself. She'd never want this for you. Never. So I'm going to help you find your way back, even if you fight me every step. That's a promise." Catherine woke in the hospital to white walls and beeping machines. Her arm ached where the 4-needle pierced her skin, pumping fluids and nutrients her body desperately needed. Her father sat in the corner, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and urgent. "Yes, I understand the waiting list," Richard was saying. "What would it take to move her to the top? Double your consultation fee? Triple? Name your price." Lorraine stood at the window, her back straight, her hands clasped in front of her. She wore her usual uniform, a simple navy dress with comfortable shoes, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. When she sensed Catherine stirring, She turned with a gentle smile. There she is, Lorraine said, approaching the bed. The doctors say you're going to be just fine. They want to keep you here a few days. Make sure you're stable. Catherine turned her head away. Fine. Nothing about this was fine. I've spoken with the best psychiatrists in the state, Richard said, ending his call and moving to Catherine's other side. Dr. Helena Vance has agreed to see you. She specializes in grief counseling and trauma. Whatever you need, sweetheart. Money is no object. The words should have comforted her, but they felt hollow. No amount of money could bring her mother back. No therapist could fill the hole in her chest. I'm going to stay with you, Richard continued, his voice thick with emotion. I'll take time off work. We'll get through this together. Lorraine met Richard's eyes over Catherine's prone form and shook her head slightly. Too much, too fast. The man meant well, but his grief made him desperate, and desperation pushed rather than pulled. Mr. Walsh, Lorraine said gently, why don't you go home, take a shower, get some rest? I'll sit with Catherine tonight. Richard looked ready to argue, but something in Lorraine's expression stopped him. He nodded, kissed Catherine's forehead, and left with promises to return first thing in the morning. When they were alone, Lorraine pulled her chair close to the bed and settled in. She didn't try to make Catherine talk. She didn't offer platitudes about time healing wounds or life going on. She simply sat there, a steady presence in the sterile room. The next day, doctors cleared Catherine to go home with strict instructions about nutrition, hydration, and psychiatric care. Richard had already arranged everything, his efficiency both comforting and overwhelming. A nurse would visit daily. Dr. Vance would begin sessions immediately. A nutritionist would create meal plans. Catherine accepted it all with the same numb silence she'd carried since the funeral. Back at the mansion, Lorraine settled Catherine into her childhood bedroom rather than the suite she'd moved into after college. The room was smaller, cozier, filled with memories from simpler times. Photos of Catherine and Patricia lined the walls. Her mother's favorite quote was framed above the desk, "Grace isn't the absence of pain. It's the presence of love through it." That evening, Lorraine appeared with a tray. But instead of elaborate meals designed to tempt Catherine's appetite, she carried only 2 mugs of clear broth and a plate of crackers. "I'm not hungry," Catherine said automatically. "I know," Lorraine replied, settling into the armchair by the window. She wrapped her hands around one mug and took a slow sip. "This is for me. I've been running around all day, forgot to eat lunch." Catherine watched her, confused. Lorraine had never eaten meals in her room before. The housekeeper maintained professional boundaries, took her breaks in the kitchen or the staff room. "Your mama and I used to talk in the mornings," Lorraine said conversationally, her eyes on the window overlooking the garden. "Before everyone else woke up, we'd sit in the breakfast room with our coffee. She'd tell me about her dreams, all the places she wanted to travel, the things she wanted to do." Catherine's throat tightened, but she said nothing. "She talked about you most of all," Lorraine continued. "How proud she was, how smart and kind and strong you turned out. She used to worry you worked too hard, didn't take enough time for yourself." "Please stop," Catherine whispered. "Did you know she was planning a surprise for your birthday?" Lorraine took another sip of broth. She'd been working on it for months. "Wanted to take you to Paris, just the 2 of you." She'd already booked the flights, picked out the hotel. A tear slid down Catherine's cheek. Her birthday was in October, 6 weeks away. Lorraine set down her empty mug and picked up the second one. She placed it on Catherine's nightstand, within easy reach but not forced upon her. "I'm going to come sit with you every evening," she said. "I'm going to tell you stories about your mama, all the little things you might not know. And I'm going to bring 2 mugs of invisible soup." "Invisible soup?" Catherine's voice cracked. "That's what my grandmother called it," Lorraine explained. "When someone's grieving so hard they can't eat, you don't push food on them. You just sit with them and sip your own soup, let them know they're not alone. Sometimes, when they're ready, they reach for the second mug. Sometimes they don't. Either way, you keep showing up." Catherine stared at the mug on her nightstand. Steam rose from it, carrying the scent of chicken and herbs. "No pressure, baby girl," Lorraine said, standing to leave. I'll be back tomorrow evening with more stories and more soup. For the first time in weeks, Catherine felt something other than crushing grief. It was small, barely there, but it felt like the faintest whisper of hope. After Lorraine left, Catherine lay in the dark for an hour. The mug sat there, silent and patient. Finally, with trembling hands, she reached for it. The broth was still warm. She brought it to her lips and took the smallest sip. It tasted like life. 10 days. That's how long it took before Catherine managed a full mug of broth. Lorraine came every evening at 7 o'clock, always with 2 mugs, always with stories. She talked about Patricia's childhood pranks, her college adventures, the day she met Richard Walsh at a charity fundraiser and knew within 5 minutes she'd marry him. Your mama was something else, Lorraine said one evening, a smile playing at her lips. She told your daddy on their first date that she wouldn't marry a workaholic. Made him promise right there in the restaurant that family would always come first. Catherine had managed a small piece of toast that day, her first solid food. Did he keep the promise? Every single day, Lorraine confirmed. He cut his work hours when you were born, never missed a recital or soccer game or graduation. Your mama knew how to set boundaries. Richard had been following Dr. Vance's advice to give Catherine space while remaining available. He checked on her each morning before work, came home for dinner instead of staying late at the office, and left small notes on her bathroom mirror. I love you. I'm here. Take all the time you need. The nutritionist, a kind woman named Angela Torres, came 3 times a week. She didn't push Catherine to eat large meals or follow rigid schedules. Instead, she taught her about gentle refeeding, about listening to her body, about nourishing herself without guilt. Your body has been through trauma, Angela explained. We're going to rebuild slowly, carefully. There's no rush, no judgment. Catherine appreciated Angela's straightforward approach. No coddling, no false cheerfulness, just facts and compassion. Dr. Vance's therapy sessions were harder. The psychiatrist asked difficult questions, pushed Catherine to examine her grief, to understand that starving herself wasn't honoring her mother but punishing herself for surviving. Your mother didn't die because you ate lunch, Dr. Vance said during their 3rd session. And refusing to eat won't bring her back. It just ensures she loses you too. The words hit like a physical blow, but Catherine knew they were true. One morning, 3 weeks into recovery, Catherine walked into the kitchen where Lorraine was preparing breakfast. The housekeeper looked up in surprise. Catherine hadn't come downstairs voluntarily since before her mother's death. Could I have some eggs? Catherine asked, her voice still weak but clear. Lorraine's face lit up, but she kept her voice steady. Scrambled or fried? Scrambled. The way Mom liked them. With cheese and chives. Coming right up, baby girl. Catherine sat at the kitchen island, the same spot where she'd eaten countless breakfasts throughout her childhood. The morning sun streamed through the windows. Outside, the roses her mother had planted were in full bloom, pink and yellow and red against the green lawn. Richard walked in looking for his usual travel mug of coffee and stopped dead in his tracks when he saw his daughter. Catherine. Morning, Dad. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and pulled her into a hug. She felt his tears in her hair, felt his body shake with relief. I was so scared, he whispered. So scared I'd lost you both. I know, Catherine said, hugging him back. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, Richard pulled back, holding her face in his hands. Just keep fighting. Keep getting better. Whatever you need, I'll provide it. Better therapists, different medications, a change of scenery. Anything. What I need is right here, Catherine said. Lorraine's stories, Angela's guidance, Dr. Vance's sessions. I just need time. Take all the time in the world, Richard said. He glanced at Lorraine, who'd been quietly cooking at the stove. And Lorraine, I want to give you a raise. A significant one. And expand your benefits package. You saved my daughter's life. Lorraine turned, spatula in hand. I don't need more money, Mr. Walsh. This family is my family. You'd do the same for me. Nevertheless, Richard insisted. I'm doubling your salary, effective immediately. And I want you to know that you have a place here for as long as you want it. Retirement fully funded, Health insurance for life, whatever you need. Lorraine's eyes glistened, but she nodded gratefully. Thank you. That means more than you know. Catherine ate her scrambled eggs slowly, savoring each bite. They tasted like childhood, like Saturday mornings when her mother would make elaborate breakfasts and they'd all sit together reading the newspaper and laughing at the comics. Over the next 2 weeks, Catherine's strength returned incrementally. She started taking short walks in the garden, sitting in the sunshine, reading books her mother had recommended. She gained back 5 pounds, then 8, then 12. The hollows in her cheeks began to fill. Her hair regained its shine. Dr. Vance suggested she might benefit from finding purpose, from channeling her grief into something meaningful. Catherine started thinking about her mother's charity work, the passion Patricia had for helping others. One evening during their soup sessions, Catherine asked Lorraine about the children's hospital where her mother had been when she died. She loved that place, Lorraine said. Spent every Wednesday afternoon reading to the kids in the cancer ward. She said those children taught her more about strength and courage than any book ever could. I want to do something for them, Catherine said. Something big. Something Mom would be proud of. Then do it, Lorraine encouraged. Your daddy will support whatever you decide. And so will I. Catherine felt purpose stirring for the first time in months. Not just survival, but a reason to keep going. A way to honor her mother's memory while building her own future. That night, Catherine finished her entire mug of soup and asked Lorraine for seconds. What would you do to honor someone you've lost? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to see how Catherine transforms her grief into something beautiful. September brought cooler weather to California, and with it, a subtle shift in the Walsh household. Catherine was eating regular meals, attending therapy consistently, and even returning to work part-time at Walsh Technologies. She'd lost muscle mass during her weeks of starvation, so Richard hired a personal trainer who specialized in gentle recovery fitness. The house felt less like a mausoleum and more like a home again, though Patricia's absence remained a constant ache. Her photos still graced every room, her roses still bloomed in the garden, her favorite books still lined the shelves in the library. On a Thursday afternoon, Lorraine received a phone call from her nephew. Christopher Bennett was driving through on his way to a conference in San Francisco and wanted to stop by for a visit. Lorraine hadn't seen him in months and immediately agreed. Christopher arrived just before lunch, his presence bringing a burst of energy to the quiet mansion. He was 26, tall and athletic, with warm brown skin, kind eyes, and an easy smile. He worked as a social worker in Sacramento, specializing in grief counseling for families who'd lost loved ones to sudden illness or accidents. Lorraine greeted him at the door with a tight hug. Look at you, all grown up and professional. Hey, Auntie, Christopher laughed, returning the embrace. Still cooking better than anyone I know? You know it. Come on, I made your favorite lunch. They headed toward the kitchen, but stopped when they encountered Catherine in the foyer. She'd been on her way out to the garden with a book, dressed in comfortable jeans and a soft sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. Catherine, Lorraine said warmly, this is my nephew Christopher Bennett. Christopher, this is Catherine Walsh. Christopher extended his hand with a gentle smile. Nice to meet you, Catherine. She shook his hand, noting the genuine kindness in his expression. You too. Are you visiting from out of town? Sacramento, he explained. I'm heading to a conference tomorrow, thought I'd stop by and see my favorite aunt first. The only aunt who cooks properly, Lorraine corrected with mock severity. Catherine found herself smiling, a real smile, not the polite mask she'd been wearing. Well, enjoy your visit. Lorraine's cooking is the best. She moved to walk past them, but Christopher spoke again. I hope this isn't intrusive, but Aunt Lorraine mentioned you've been through a difficult time recently. I work in grief counseling, so if you ever need someone to talk to outside of formal therapy, I'm happy to listen. Something in his tone, free from pity or judgment, made Catherine pause. Thank you. That's kind of you. No pressure, Christopher added. Just putting it out there. Catherine nodded and continued to the garden, but she found herself thinking about the encounter as she tried to read her book. Christopher hadn't looked at her like she was broken. Hadn't spoken in that careful, measured tone people used around her now. He'd simply offered help and left the choice to her. An hour later, as Catherine returned to the house, she heard laughter coming from the kitchen. Following the sound, she found Lorraine and Christopher sharing lunch at the kitchen table, reminiscing about family gatherings and childhood memories. "And then you fell right into the pool with all your clothes on," Lorraine was saying through laughter. "In my defense," Christopher protested, grinning, "your apple pie was worth it." Catherine hesitated in the doorway, not wanting to intrude, but Lorraine spotted her immediately. "Catherine, honey, come join us. There's plenty. I don't want to interrupt family time." "You're not interrupting," Christopher said, pulling out a chair. "Please, sit. Aunt Lorraine made enough food for 10 people. Catherine found herself accepting, settling at the table as Lorraine fixed her a plate. The conversation flowed easily, Christopher sharing stories about his work without the graphic details but with enough heart to make it real. "I had a case last month," he said, "a teenager who lost his father in a car accident. Kid blamed himself because they'd argued that morning. Refused to talk to anyone, barely ate, stopped going to school." Catherine's attention sharpened. That sounded familiar. "What happened?" she asked. "His grandmother did something clever," Christopher continued. "She didn't force him to talk about his feelings. Instead, she started building a photo album of his father, all the good memories. She'd work on it in the living room where he could see, never asking him to help, just doing it. Eventually, his curiosity got the better of him. He started adding photos too, then stories, then his own feelings. Creating something positive from the grief helped him heal." Catherine absorbed this, thinking about her mother's charity work, her passion for helping others. "Do you think that works for everyone? Channeling grief into action?" "Not for everyone," Christopher admitted. "Some people need to sit with their grief first, feel it fully before they can transform it. But when someone's ready, giving them purpose can be incredibly healing." They talked for another hour, about grief, recovery, and finding meaning after loss. Christopher treated Catherine like an equal, not a patient or a victim. He challenged some of her thoughts, agreed with others, and shared his own experiences with loss. "I lost my mom when I was 19, he said quietly. "Cancer. Watching her fade over 2 years was its own kind of torture. When she finally passed, I felt guilty for being relieved. Took me a long time to understand that relief wasn't about wanting her gone. It was about wanting her suffering to end." "I'm sorry," Catherine said, meaning it. "Thank you. It's been 7 years, and I still miss her every day. But I found purpose in helping others navigate similar pain." "My mom would have liked that." When Christopher left that evening, he gave Catherine his card. "If you ever want to talk, or need advice on starting a foundation or whatever you're planning, call me. I have connections in the non-profit world." Catherine pocketed the card, surprised by how much she wanted to take him up on the offer. "He's a good man," Lorraine said after Christopher drove away. "Takes after his mother, my sister. She raised him right. He seems nice," Catherine agreed, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Interest. Curiosity. Hope for connection beyond grief. That night, she pulled out her laptop and started researching mental health foundations. Her mother's planned trip to Paris could wait. Right now, Catherine had a different journey to begin. October arrived with Catherine's 25th birthday, a day she'd been dreading. The Paris trip her mother had planned sat unused, the tickets expired, the dream postponed indefinitely. But instead of spiraling, Catherine channeled her energy into something tangible. She'd spent the past 2 weeks researching non-profits, reading articles about mental health advocacy, and reaching out to organizations her mother had supported. The more she learned, the more passionate she became about creating something meaningful. On her birthday morning, Richard knocked on her bedroom door with breakfast on a tray. Lorraine had made Catherine's favorite pancakes with fresh berries, and Richard had added a small wrapped box with a ribbon. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," he said, setting the tray on her lap as she sat up in bed. "Your mother and I picked this out together back in July." Catherine's throat tightened, but she managed to open the box. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant shaped like an open book, pages fanning out. Her mother had always said books were windows to infinite worlds. "It's beautiful," Catherine whispered, fastening it around her neck. "Thank you, Dad. Your mother wanted you to remember that life holds infinite stories," Richard said, his voice thick. "That even when one chapter ends, another begins." They held each other for a long moment, two people learning to navigate grief while moving forward. Later that day, Catherine called Christopher. They'd been texting occasionally since his visit, brief exchanges about articles or resources he thought might help her foundation plans. "Hey," Christopher answered on the second ring. "Happy birthday." "Thanks. How did you know?" "Aunt Lorraine might have mentioned it," he admitted with a laugh. "How are you celebrating?" "Quietly. But I wanted to talk to you about the foundation. I've been doing research, but I'm overwhelmed by all the legal requirements and setup processes." "I can help with that," Christopher offered immediately. "I've helped establish 3 nonprofits in the past 4 years. Why don't we set up a proper meeting? I could drive down this weekend if you're free." Catherine felt a flutter of something in her chest. Nervousness, anticipation. "That would be great. Saturday?" "Saturday it is." When Christopher arrived that weekend, he came prepared with folders, sample documents, and a comprehensive guide to nonprofit formation. They set up in Richard's study, spreading papers across the large oak desk that had witnessed decades of business deals. "First question," Christopher said, pulling out a legal pad. "What's your mission statement? What exactly do you want this foundation to accomplish?" Catherine had thought about this constantly. "I want to support mental health initiatives, specifically around grief counseling and suicide prevention. I want to make therapy accessible to people who can't afford it. And I want to educate families about recognizing when someone is struggling." Christopher nodded, making notes. "That's solid. Specific enough to be actionable, broad enough to make real impact. What are you thinking for the name?" "The Patricia Walsh Foundation," Catherine said firmly. "I want people to know her name, her story. I want her legacy to be about helping others heal." "Beautiful," Christopher said, and the sincerity in his voice made Catherine's chest warm. "Okay, let's talk structure." They worked for hours, Christopher explaining 501(c)(3) requirements, board composition, fundraising strategies, and program development. He was patient and thorough, never making Catherine feel stupid for asking questions. "You're going to need a solid board of directors," Christopher explained. "Usually 7 to 9 people who bring different skills and connections. Will you be on it?" Catherine asked, then immediately felt presumptuous. "I mean, if you want. No pressure." Christopher smiled. "I'd be honored. And I can suggest a few other people from my network who'd be perfect." Richard joined them for lunch, immediately expressing his full support. "Whatever you need, Catherine. Funding, office space, connections, legal team. Consider it done." "Dad, I appreciate it, but I want to do this properly," Catherine said. "I'll accept seed funding to get started, but I want the foundation to sustain itself through fundraising and grants." "Independent streak," Richard said proudly to Christopher. "Gets that from her mother." Over the following weeks, Catherine and Christopher worked together regularly. Sometimes they met at the Walsh mansion, sometimes at coffee shops, once at Christopher's apartment in Sacramento where he showed her other foundations he'd helped build. Their relationship developed naturally from professional collaboration into genuine friendship. Christopher was easy to talk to, never pushing but always available. He understood grief in a way Catherine's other friends didn't. He could sit with silence, appreciate progress however small, and celebrate victories without minimizing the ongoing pain. One evening in late October, after a particularly productive planning session, they took a walk in the Walsh Gardens. The roses had started their autumn bloom, and the evening air was crisp and cool. "Can I ask you something?" Catherine said as they walked the stone path. "Anything. Did it get easier after your mom died?" Christopher considered this carefully. "It got different. The sharp edges softened into dull aches. I stopped crying every day, then every week, then just on special occasions. But I don't think it ever gets easy. You just learn to carry it better. Catherine nodded, appreciating his honesty. I'm scared of forgetting her. Like if I'm happy again, it means I've moved on or something. Being happy isn't forgetting, Christopher said gently. It's honoring. Your mom wouldn't want you frozen in grief forever. She'd want you living, loving, building beautiful things. Like this foundation. They sat on a bench near the fountain, watching the water dance in the fading light. Catherine felt something shift between them, a subtle change in the air. She glanced at Christopher and found him already looking at her with an expression that made her heart skip. What? She asked softly. Nothing, Christopher said, then reconsidered. Actually, not nothing. I just think you're remarkable. The way you've turned your pain into purpose. Your mom would be so proud. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes, but they were different tears. Not the burning, choking tears of early grief, but gentle tears of gratitude and hope. Thank you for helping me, she said. I couldn't do this without you. Yes, you could, Christopher countered. But I'm glad you don't have to. November brought cooler weather and real momentum. Catherine filed the incorporation papers for the Patricia Walsh Foundation with Christopher's guidance and her father's legal team ensuring everything was perfect. They secured non-profit status, established a board of directors, and began developing program outlines. Richard donated the seed funding as promised, but Catherine also reached out to her mother's friends, her father's business contacts, and community leaders. The response was overwhelming. People who'd known Patricia wanted to honor her memory. People who hadn't known her were moved by Catherine's story and mission. The foundation's office was set up in a renovated building downtown, not far from Walsh Technologies. Catherine insisted on modest accommodations, channeling resources into programs rather than luxury. The space was bright and welcoming, with comfortable furniture and Patricia's favorite flowers always fresh in vases. Christopher joined the board officially and helped recruit other members. They assembled a diverse group, a psychiatrist, a social worker, a fundraising specialist, a retired nonprofit executive, a lawyer, an accountant, and 2 community advocates who'd experienced mental health crises in their own families. This is a strong board, Christopher told Catherine after their first official meeting. Everyone brings something unique, and they're all genuinely committed to the mission. Catherine felt pride swell in her chest. Mom would have loved this team. The Foundation's flagship program focused on providing free grief counseling to families who'd lost loved ones suddenly. They partnered with local therapists willing to offer sliding scale sessions, created support groups in community centers, and developed educational materials for schools and workplaces. Catherine threw herself into the work, finding healing in helping others navigate the path she'd walked. She met with families, listened to their stories, and offered resources that might have helped her those first terrible weeks. One afternoon in mid-November, a woman named Janet Morrison came to the office seeking help. She'd lost her husband to a heart attack 3 months earlier and her teenage son had stopped eating. Catherine sat with Janet in her office, holding the woman's hands as she cried. I don't know how to reach him. He's fading away, and I can't lose him too. I know, Catherine said softly. I was that son. I stopped eating after my mom died. Nearly died myself. Janet's eyes widened. How did you come back? Catherine told her about Lorraine's invisible soup, about the gentle persistence that saved her life. She gave Janet practical advice about refeeding, about therapy options, about the importance of presence over pressure. Don't give up on him, Catherine urged. Keep showing up, keep offering love without demands. He'll find his way back. 3 weeks later, Janet called to say her son had started eating again. He'd agreed to therapy. They were going to be okay. Catherine cried after that call, but they were good tears. Healing tears. Christopher noticed the change in her, the way she'd grown stronger and more confident. They were spending more time together, ostensibly for foundation work but often extending into dinners or movies or long walks. The boundary between professional and personal had blurred gradually, naturally. One evening in early December, Catherine invited Christopher to the Walsh mansion for dinner. Richard had traveled to New York for business meetings, and Lorraine had the evening off, so they had the house to themselves. Catherine cooked, Or attempted to. She was rusty in the kitchen, but Christopher helped, laughing as they figured out recipes together. They ate pasta that was slightly overcooked and salad that was perfectly crisp, drinking wine and talking about everything and nothing. I haven't done this in so long, Catherine admitted as they cleaned up together. Just normal stuff. Cooking, laughing, enjoying someone's company without grief sitting between us. Feels good, doesn't it? Christopher asked, drying a plate. It feels wonderful, Catherine said, then hesitated. Is that okay? To feel wonderful? Christopher set down the plate and turned to face her fully. Catherine, your mom died. That's a tragedy, and you'll carry that loss forever. But you're still alive. You're allowed to feel joy, to build new relationships, to have experiences that make you happy. That's not betraying her memory. It's honoring her hope for you. Catherine felt emotion rise in her throat. She'd needed to hear that, needed permission she'd been afraid to grant herself. I like spending time with you, she said quietly. More than I probably should for a professional relationship. Christopher smiled, that warm, genuine smile that had drawn her from the beginning. I like spending time with you too. And for the record, our professional relationship ended when I stopped being able to think about foundation work without thinking about you first. Catherine's breath caught. Really? Really? Christopher confirmed, stepping closer. I've been trying to be respectful, give you space to heal. But Catherine, you're remarkable. Smart, compassionate, strong. I'd like to spend more time with you, if you're interested. Not as colleagues, as something more. Catherine felt fear and hope war in her chest. Dating felt enormous, felt like stepping into unknown territory. But looking at Christopher, seeing the sincerity and kindness in his eyes, she realized she was ready. I'm interested, she said. Christopher's smile widened. Yeah. He took her hand gently, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, he laced their fingers together. We'll go slow. No pressure, no expectations. Just see where this goes. I'd like that, Catherine said, squeezing his hand. They spent the rest of the evening on the couch, talking and laughing, Catherine's head eventually resting on Christopher's shoulder. It felt natural, felt right, felt like the beginning of something beautiful. When Lorraine came home late that night, she found them asleep together on the couch, Christopher's arm around Catherine protectively, both of them peaceful. The housekeeper smiled, pulled a blanket over them, and whispered a quiet thank you to Patricia, wherever she was. December brought the Foundation's first major milestone, a gala fundraiser to officially launch the Patricia Walsh Foundation to the wider community. Catherine had been planning it for weeks with Christopher's help, determined to create an event that honored her mother while raising significant funds for their programs. The gala was scheduled for mid-December at the Grand Hotel downtown. Richard spared no expense, insisting on covering all event costs so that every dollar raised could go directly to programs. He'd invited his extensive network of business leaders, philanthropists, and community figures. Catherine threw herself into preparations, designing the program, coordinating speakers, selecting the menu. She wanted everything perfect, wanted her mother's name attached to something truly special. Christopher was by her side through it all, helping with logistics, offering suggestions, and providing calm reassurance when Catherine's perfectionism threatened to overwhelm her. Their relationship had deepened naturally over the past few weeks, moving from hand-holding to gentle kisses to comfortable intimacy. You're doing too much, Christopher said one evening as they reviewed seating charts in Catherine's home office. You need to delegate, trust your team. I know, Catherine admitted, rubbing her tired eyes. I just want this to be perfect. It will be, Christopher assured her, pulling her chair closer to his. Because it comes from your heart. Your mom would be proud regardless of whether the napkins are ivory or cream. Catherine laughed despite herself. They're pearl, actually. See? I don't even know the difference, Christopher teased. And it'll still be beautiful. Richard had embraced Catherine's relationship with Christopher wholeheartedly, inviting him to family dinners and treating him like a son rather than an employee of the foundation. One evening over dinner, he raised his glass in a toast. To Catherine, Richard said, his voice warm. For taking tragedy and turning it into purpose. Your mother and I always knew you were special, but you've exceeded every expectation. And to Christopher, for being exactly the kind of man Patricia would have wanted for our daughter. Patient, kind, and genuine. Catherine blushed while Christopher thanked Richard graciously. Lorraine, joining them for the family meal as she often did now, added her own blessing. Miss Patricia is smiling down on all of us, she said, squeezing Catherine's hand. I feel it in my bones. The week before the gala, Catherine received a call from a local television station wanting to do a feature on the foundation and her journey through grief. She hesitated, unsure about sharing her story so publicly, but Christopher encouraged her. People need to hear this, he said. Need to know they're not alone, that recovery is possible. You could save lives by sharing yours. Catherine agreed, and the interview aired 3 days before the gala. She spoke honestly about her mother's death, about stopping eating, about nearly dying. She talked about Lorraine's invisible soup, about finding purpose in helping others, about learning that grief and joy could coexist. The response was overwhelming. The foundation's phone rang constantly with people seeking help, offering donations, sharing their own stories. Catherine realized Christopher was right. Vulnerability was powerful. The night of the gala arrived with December's chill in the air and stars bright overhead. The Grand Hotel was transformed with elegant decorations in Patricia's favorite colors, soft blues and silvers. Photos of Patricia lined the entrance hall, showing her laughing, working with children, living fully. Catherine wore a midnight blue gown that had been her mother's, altered to fit her frame. She'd lost weight during her grief but had gained back healthy curves, her body strong again. The gold book pendant her parents had given her rested at her throat. Christopher arrived in a sharp black suit, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. You look stunning. You clean up pretty well yourself, Catherine said, accepting his offered arm. The ballroom filled with over 300 guests. Richard had sold every table, corporate sponsorships funding the entire event. Catherine mingled gracefully, thanking donors, sharing the foundation's vision, telling her mother's story over and over. When it came time for speeches, Richard went first. He spoke about Patricia's passion for helping others, about losing her too soon, about watching Catherine nearly follow her into death. But my daughter survived, Richard said, his voice breaking slightly. And she transformed her pain into this incredible foundation. Tonight, we honor Patricia's memory by supporting the work she would have championed. Please give generously. The crowd applauded, many wiping tears from their eyes. Then Catherine took the stage. She looked out at the sea of faces, felt Christopher's encouraging smile from the front table, and began. My mother died on a Tuesday in August, she said clearly. One moment she was here, laughing and planning lunch. The next, she was gone. And I couldn't handle it. I stopped eating, stopped caring, stopped wanting to live. She told them about Lorraine's intervention, about invisible soup, about the long road back to health. She explained the foundation's mission, the programs they'd launched, the lives they'd already touched. Grief doesn't end, Catherine said. But it transforms. It softens. And when we channel it into helping others, we honor those we've lost while healing ourselves. That's what the Patricia Walsh Foundation is about. Turning tragedy into hope, one person at a time. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. By the end of the night, they'd raised over $2 million. As the event wound down, Christopher found Catherine on the balcony, taking a moment to breathe. You did it, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. You created something beautiful from something terrible. Catherine leaned back against him, feeling grateful and hopeful and in love. We did it. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Yes, you could have, Christopher corrected gently. But I'm glad you didn't have to. They stood together under the December stars, Catherine feeling her mother's presence like a warm blanket. She was going to be okay. More than okay. She was going to thrive. Has grief ever pushed you to create something meaningful? Tell us your story in the comments and subscribe to see the beautiful conclusion of Catherine's journey. Spring arrived 6 months after the gala, bringing with it new growth in the gardens and new programs through the foundation. Catherine had fully embraced her role as executive director, working full-time alongside a small but dedicated staff. The Patricia Walsh Foundation had expanded beyond anyone's initial expectations. They'd opened 3 community counseling centers in underserved areas, provided funding for over 200 families to access grief therapy, launched a school-based mental health awareness program, and established a crisis hotline. The television interview had generated ongoing media interest, with Catherine becoming a recognized advocate for mental health support. Christopher had moved to a hybrid role, maintaining his social work practice part-time while serving as the foundation's program director. He and Catherine had found a rhythm that balanced their professional and personal lives, though the lines continued to blur in the best ways. One April morning, Catherine woke to sunlight streaming through the windows of Christopher's apartment. They'd spent the night there after a late foundation meeting, and she'd grown comfortable in the space he'd made his own. Books lined every wall, plants thrived on every surface, and photos of his mother watched over the kitchen. "Morning," Christopher said, bringing her coffee. "Big day today." Catherine sat up, accepting the mug gratefully. "The biggest. I can't believe it's actually happening." Today marked the official launch of the Foundation's signature program, the Invisible Soup Initiative. Named after Lorraine's gentle intervention, the program trained family members and friends to support loved ones through grief without force or pressure. It emphasized presence, patience, and unconditional love. The launch event was scheduled for that afternoon at the main community center. They'd invited families they'd helped, board members, donors, and media. Lorraine would be the guest of honor, sharing her story about saving Catherine's life. Back at the Walsh mansion, Catherine found Lorraine in the kitchen preparing lunch as always. The housekeeper looked nervous, unusual for her typically unflappable demeanor. "I'm not good at public speaking," Lorraine admitted when Catherine hugged her. "What if I mess up?" "You won't," Catherine assured her. "Just tell the truth. Tell them about the soup, about showing up every day, about loving me back to life." "That's all I did," Lorraine said. "I just loved you." "Exactly," Catherine said. "And that's what the program teaches. That sometimes love is the most powerful medicine." Richard had taken the afternoon off from Walsh Technologies, something he'd been doing more regularly since Patricia's death. He'd learned the lesson his wife had tried to teach him, that family mattered more than quarterly earnings. "Ready?" he asked Catherine as they prepared to leave for the event. "Ready," Catherine confirmed, though butterflies danced in her stomach. The community center was packed when they arrived. Families filled every seat, people stood along the walls, and news cameras lined the back. Catherine felt overwhelming gratitude for everyone who'd believed in this vision. The program began with Christopher explaining the initiative's structure. Trained peer counselors would work with families in crisis, teaching them gentle intervention techniques based on Lorraine's approach. The program was free, accessible, and designed to prevent tragedy. "We can't bring back the people we've lost," Christopher said to the crowd. "But we can prevent more loss. We can teach families how to recognize warning signs, how to offer support without judgment, how to be present through the darkest times." Then Lorraine took the stage, her hands trembling slightly until she caught Catherine's encouraging smile. "I'm not a therapist or a doctor," Lorraine began, her voice gaining strength. "I'm just a housekeeper who loved a girl like she was my own. When Catherine stopped eating after her mama died, I didn't know fancy techniques. I just knew I couldn't let her fade away." She told them about invisible soup, about sitting with Catherine every evening, about patient persistence and unconditional love. She explained that healing wasn't about forcing recovery but about creating space for it. "Sometimes all a grieving person needs is to know they're not alone," Lorraine said. "That someone will sit with them in the darkness until they're ready to find light again." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. Several people were crying, recognizing their own experiences in Lorraine's story. "Catherine is alive today because someone refused to give up on her," Lorraine concluded. "This program will teach you to be that person for someone you love. Because everybody deserves someone who'll bring them invisible soup." The applause was thunderous. Lorraine stepped off the stage directly into Catherine's arms, both women crying and laughing simultaneously. Then Catherine took the microphone for the final remarks. She looked out at the crowd, saw the hope in their faces, felt her mother's spirit in the room. 6 months ago, I almost died from grief, Catherine said. Today, I'm standing here, healthy and hopeful, because people loved me through the worst time of my life. My father, who gave me space while remaining present. Lorraine, who saved my life with soup and stories. Christopher, who helped me transform pain into purpose. And my mother, whose memory guides everything I do. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The Patricia Walsh Foundation exists because my mother believed everyone deserves support during life's darkest moments. The Invisible Soup Initiative is our promise to provide that support, freely and without judgment. If you're grieving, you're not alone. If someone you love is grieving, you're not powerless. Together, we can heal. As the crowd rose in ovation, Catherine felt profound peace. Her mother would be proud. The foundation would help thousands. And Catherine had found her purpose, her calling, her reason to keep going. That evening, Richard hosted a celebration dinner at the mansion. The core group gathered around the dining room table: Catherine, Christopher, Lorraine, and Richard. 4 people bound by loss and love, building something beautiful together. I want to make a formal announcement, Richard said, raising his glass. Lorraine, you saved my daughter's life. No amount of money can repay that debt, but I want to try. I'm establishing a trust fund in your name, enough to ensure you're comfortable for the rest of your life. You'll never have to worry about retirement or medical bills or anything else. Lorraine's eyes widened. Mr. Walsh, that's too much. It's not nearly enough, Richard insisted. Please accept it. Let me do this for you. Lorraine looked at Catherine, who nodded encouragingly. Accept it, Catherine urged. You deserve it. Then I accept, Lorraine said, wiping tears. With gratitude. This family has been my blessing. You've been ours, Richard replied, his voice thick with emotion. Later, Catherine and Christopher walked in the garden under the stars. The roses were blooming again, their scent sweet on the night air. Your mom would be so proud, Christopher said, holding Catherine close. I hope so, Catherine replied. I feel her with me sometimes, like she's watching and approving. She is, Christopher assured her. And she's not the only one proud of you. I am too. Every single day. Catherine turned in his arms, looking up at his kind face. I love you, she said, the words coming easily now. Thank you for helping me find my way back. I love you too, Christopher replied, kissing her gently. And you found your own way. I just walked beside you. They stood together in Patricia's garden, 2 people who'd found each other through tragedy, building a future rooted in hope and healing. Summer arrived in full bloom, and with it came the Foundation's 6-month anniversary. The Patricia Walsh Foundation had exceeded every metric they'd set. They'd helped over 500 families, trained 100 peer counselors, and expanded to 3 additional cities. Catherine's story had inspired similar initiatives across the country. On a warm July morning, Catherine woke in her own bed at the mansion. She'd moved back into her suite months ago, no longer afraid of the memories. Christopher stayed over frequently, his presence comfortable and right in the space she'd once shared only with grief. Today was special for multiple reasons. First, it marked 1 year since her mother's death. Second, the foundation was unveiling a memorial garden at the community center. And third, Catherine had a surprise planned for Christopher. She found her father in his study, reviewing foundation financial reports. He'd become one of the foundation's most active board members, using his business acumen to ensure sustainability. Morning, sweetheart, Richard greeted her, closing his laptop. Are you ready for today? I think so, Catherine said, settling into the chair across from him. It's going to be emotional. Your mother would love what you've built, Richard said. She always said that true legacy isn't measured in dollars but in lives touched. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each remembering Patricia in their own way. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it had transformed into something bearable. They could remember her with smiles now, could celebrate her life without drowning in her death. Lorraine appeared with breakfast, her presence as constant and comforting as always. She'd used part of Richard's trust fund to help her sister's family with medical bills and had invested the rest carefully, but she'd refused to retire. "This is my home," she told them. "Why would I leave?" The memorial garden dedication was scheduled for early afternoon. Catherine arrived early with Christopher to ensure everything was perfect. The space had been transformed into a peaceful sanctuary with benches, flowering plants, and a central fountain. A bronze plaque bore Patricia's name and her favorite quote about grace and love. Families they'd helped began arriving, many bringing flowers or cards. Catherine greeted each one, listening to their stories, celebrating their healing. One woman, Janet Morrison, brought her son, who'd recovered fully from his grief-induced eating disorder. His applying to colleges, Janet told Catherine, tears of joy in her eyes. He wants to study psychology, help others the way you helped us. Catherine hugged them both, feeling profound satisfaction. This was why she'd fought to survive. This was her mother's legacy continuing through her. When everyone had gathered, Christopher stepped forward to begin the ceremony. He spoke about loss, healing, and the power of community support. He thanked the donors, volunteers, and staff who'd made the foundation possible. Then Catherine took her place beside the memorial fountain. She held a single yellow rose, her mother's favorite. "1 year ago today, my world ended," Catherine said, her voice steady despite the emotion. "My beautiful, vibrant, loving mother died suddenly, and I thought I couldn't survive it. I stopped eating, stopped caring, stopped wanting to live." She looked at Lorraine, who stood nearby with Richard. "But people who loved me refused to let me go. They sat with me, fed me invisible soup, and loved me back to life. They taught me that grief and joy could coexist, that honoring someone's memory meant living fully, not dying slowly." Catherine placed the yellow rose in the fountain, watching it float on the water. "This garden represents hope. It says that even in our darkest moments, beauty can grow. That loss doesn't have to mean the end of everything. That we can transform pain into purpose." She turned to Christopher, her heart full. "And it represents love. The love that sustains us through tragedy, the love that gives us reason to keep going, the love that builds futures from the ashes of what we've lost." Christopher stepped forward, and Catherine's breath caught. He was holding a small box. "Catherine Walsh," Christopher said, dropping to one knee as gasps rippled through the crowd. "You've taught me that courage looks like getting up every day when everything hurts. That strength means asking for help when you need it. That love means choosing life even when death feels easier." Catherine's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "I love you," Christopher continued. "I love your compassion, your determination, your beautiful heart. I love how you've turned tragedy into triumph, how you help others heal while healing yourself. I want to build a life with you, honor your mother's memory together, and create new joy from old pain. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Catherine said through tears, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, absolutely yes." The crowd erupted in applause as Christopher slid a simple diamond ring onto Catherine's finger. They kissed, both crying and laughing, surrounded by people who'd walked through darkness with them. Richard approached, hugging them both tightly. "Patricia would be so happy," he whispered. "So incredibly happy." Lorraine joined the embrace, creating a circle of family bound not by blood but by love. "Miss Patricia is here," she said confidently. "I feel her smiling down on all of us." That evening, the extended foundation family gathered at the Walsh mansion for a celebration that felt like both a wedding engagement party and a memorial service. They toasted Patricia's memory, celebrated Catherine and Christopher's future, and reflected on the journey they'd shared. Catherine stood in the garden as twilight fell, watching fireflies dance among the roses. Christopher joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I thought I'd ever be again," Catherine admitted. "I'll always miss Mom. That hole will never completely fill. But I've learned to build around it, to create new joy even though the sadness remains. That's all any of us can do," Christopher said. "Honor the past while embracing the future." They watched the stars emerge one by one, the same stars that had shone the night Patricia died, the same stars that would shine on their wedding day, the same stars that would witness all their futures. Inside, Lorraine was showing Richard photos of Christopher's family, discussing wedding plans and future grandchildren with the enthusiasm of a woman who'd claimed both Catherine and Christopher as her own. The Patricia Walsh Foundation would continue growing, helping thousands navigate grief with grace. Catherine and Christopher would marry the following spring in the memorial garden, surrounded by the family they'd chosen and the people they'd helped heal. And somewhere, Catherine felt certain, her mother was watching it all with pride and joy, her love transcending death itself. Life had delivered unbearable loss, but Catherine had survived it. She transformed starvation into nourishment, grief into purpose, and despair into hope. She'd honored her mother's memory by living fully, loving deeply, and helping others find their way through darkness. The invisible soup had saved her life. But it was love, patience, purpose, and connection that had taught her to live again. And that, Catherine knew, was the greatest gift of all. The end.